Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Uninsured Ankles podcast. Joining me this evening are Jordan Stratton and Josh Barton. How you guys doing this evening, gentlemen?
We're doing pretty good. Look,
Yeah?
March Madness is still cooking, so I'm a happy camper. Yeah. Then in about 2 weeks, I will be depressed.
Yeah, I feel you on that.
Well, the Celtics have the hottest winning streak in the NBA right now, so I'm feeling good.
No one cares. Have you watched any NCAA basketball, Josh?
I have not.
Oh man, you're killing me, dude. And yeah, we do care about the Celtics. I'm just giving you a hard time. We'll get to them in a little bit. But let's start off with some of that NCAA tournament. We just wrapped up the second weekend a couple hours ago because we're recording this in the evening, Sunday evening. Um, what do you guys got for some hot takes and some things you're seeing? I'm going to look to Jordan first because I know he's been paying attention a little more than Josh after we just had that self-admitted no watch thus
Not a
far.
single ounce of watch basketball. Um, I think, well, one thing to note is that this is the first tournament since 2008 where all four one seeds made the Final Four. And outside of that 2008 year, that it had never happened before. So second time in history that all four one seeds make the Final Four. But I can't say that I'm particularly surprised. Houston has had a dominant stretch. I thought it was going to be a little closer with Tennessee since they're both defensive powerhouses. I was really looking forward to the matchup with the number 1 and 2 defensive teams in the country going against each other. And I mean, it was a defensive showdown, but Houston just has a few more offensive weapons than Tennessee does, and that showed through today. Duke
It was
just,
a rough first half in that game, by the way.
yeah,
I don't know if you watched it. Like Ziegler is their dude as well, and I loved him for Tennessee. But it was like what 15 to 28 or something at halftime.
yeah, and it was just a slugfest back
Yep.
and forth, lots of bricks. It was great.
Yep. Sorry,
Um,
you're gonna say something about Duke as
no,
well.
just that Alabama came in, was coming off of that win that they had on Thursday night when they put up 113 points on
Oh yeah.
BYU to come in against Duke, and Duke holds them to what was it, 60 something points, I think.
Hmm.
Um, that's a something that we don't talk about a ton for Duke is their defense. But they were a top 20 defense in the country for a reason. They have a ton of length on that lineup. They've got I was surprised to hear this. They're actually the tallest team in the country on average for the guys that play minutes for them. On average, they're the tallest because the smallest guy in their starting lineup is 6'4", 6'5". In
That's
what's is
Proctor, right?
James?
Oh, James. Yeah.
Yeah, James is their smallest, and then Knipple's 6'6", but he looks smaller because he's right there with Flagg, who's 6'9". I think they might list him at 6'10", but who knows with shoes what he's at. And then they got the big guy, common,
Malawak.
yeah, Malawach, who's 7'2".
That dude's a long dude. He's
He,
gonna have some good days in the NBA ahead of him.
yeah. Anyway, moral of the story is it was really impressive to see their defense on display against the best offensive team in the country. Yeah, those are some of my first thoughts. The Auburn game leaves me worried about Auburn against Florida with Broome going down with his injury. Seems like it's something that he's going to try to play through, but between a tweaked ankle and I don't even know what kind of injury he's got on his elbow, but he was a shell of himself once he came back into the game, even though he did knock down that three right after he came in, which was cool. Love to see it. Got the fans involved. But yeah, it's gonna be an interesting Final Four.
It will be. I mean, you said it before, but if there's going to be a year that you had four number one seeds make it, it's definitely this one. It was at least three of them, excluding Houston, all felt like inevitabilities to some degree. And Houston's only thing that was kind of a knock in my book was their pace of play. But their defense is so stellar. Kelvin Sampson is such a great coach. It all makes sense putting it all together as well. So they're hitting their stride at the right time. And is it you said Florida's playing Auburn and then Duke is playing Houston in the Final Four first?
Yep.
That's gonna be those are gonna be some fun matchups. Some super
Yeah.
fun matchups.
And I gotta say, I was a little bummed that I have Florida picked in a couple of my brackets, but I was kind of bummed that my Red Raiders went down against Florida, and they went down in very similar fashion to the way that they took down Arkansas, which was tough. In the Arkansas Texas Tech game, Arkansas was up by 11 points with like 3 minutes left and just had an utter collapse. In the game between Texas Tech and Florida, Texas Tech was up by 9 points with 2 minutes and 50 seconds left. They hit a three to cut it to six, and then they called their last timeout with 2 minutes and 40 seconds left. Florida did, down by six. And I was like, dude, what's the Florida coach doing? This is a close game. He's gonna, you got to save those timeouts for the last minute of the game if we need to extend the game. They came out, they completely switched their defense. They brought in a full court press and just completely threw Texas Tech off their game and proceeded to go on an 18-4 run to close the game. And it was one of the few moments where I was just like, that's a good coach. That
Yeah,
guy knows what he's doing.
Golden's a good coach for sure. I like him a lot as a coach. So that we don't get too far down the NCAA rabbit hole and completely lose Josh and make him fall asleep in the pod. Let's do some picks for the finals here, and then we'll start getting into some transition from draft prospects that we're watching here in the NCAA, which Josh has some vested interest in. So we can get this more complete. Jordan, who are you taking for the NCAA tournament to win it all, and who are they playing?
I'm really curious to see how this Duke Houston game goes. I feel like it could be a toss up, especially with how well both Duke and Houston shut down their opponents in their Elite Eight matchups. Duke really just has a similar vibe to UConn did last year, really just handling all of their matchups so far. So I'd say I'd be surprised if Duke doesn't win it all. They just look too good. They've got too many NBA guys on their roster. They're long, they're deep. Unless Houston completely shuts them down offensively, I think Duke probably wins it all against Florida in the final.
Yeah, Florida, we talked about it before the pod started. Clayton's been a dude this whole tournament. He's been super impressive. And if they keep doing what they're doing and Broome is out or even semi encumbered during the game, it's Florida's
Wraps.
game. Yeah. And I think I agree with you as well on on Duke probably doing it. They feel inevitable. They feel like the Thanos right now, right? Cooper Flagg is the guy, right? He is the best player in college basketball. He's going to be one of the best players in the NBA coming up. It's gonna be one of those things, right? Like he's had so much hype coming into the season too, being a part of Team USA basketball and being there's no college prospects there that were on that team for Team USA in the offseason leading up to the Olympics, but they had Cooper Flagg, and Cooper Flagg availed himself well. He's doing well in the NCAA tournament. His game fits the NCAA, but also is going to translate well to the NBA. I think this is going to be, his crowning achievement in the NCAA and a nice send off to the NBA as the first overall pick. Josh, what do you
Yeah,
think?
Yeah, I mean, I have watched zero college basketball this year, but I'm also going to pick Duke because I've been rolling the Cooper Flag hype train all year. Let your f freak flag fly, gentlemen. It's interesting you mention him because that's the guy I want to start with as we transition into the prospects and the questions I had for you guys as our college basketball experts, shall we say. So Cooper Flag, when he was having his time with Team USA that you just mentioned, a lot of the comparison that I heard was kind of like a Sean Marion with a little bit more polish and not the funky jumper. Now that he led Duke, I think in points, rebounds, assists, and was it steals and blocks or whatever it was,
it
something
was
ridiculous,
all five.
all five statistical categories. What would you say is his NBA player comparison? Because I've heard Jason Tatum, and that's the name that gets my ears feeling a little funny hearing that name.
I don't think it's Tatum. I think it's Westbrook. And I say Westbrook because Westbrook has a motor. He's got a dog to him. And I think that is part of what translates here is Flagg's dog is what ultimately is what he is. Like he is the beyond ultimate glue guy. He passes, he shoots, he rebounds, he plays defense. He's doing all the things. And yes, Westbrook is not what he is, and he's a little bit more of a head case than I think Flagg will ever be. But I think he brings that intensity. He elevates those around him. And the motor and intensity is something that we don't see a whole lot at that level in the NBA. And I think Westbrook brings it. And he continues to bring it. I love Westbrook for that. But I think that's what Flagg is also going to continue to bring. And that's what's going to make him valuable year one, too, is because year one as well, not year two, but for that exact reason, right? He's going to bring that intensity. He's going to elevate all those guys around him. And if he's averaging 10 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists in a full game, you know those are all going to be meaningful, and everything else is going to kind of sync up around him because of that.
Yeah, imagine if you gave Brandon Ingram a motor. How good that player would be. I think that's what we're talking about here. He's got a good handle over the last couple months of the season. He's really started to add to his bag, it feels like. I mean, there was a couple moves that he made just in the last game where I was like, man, I did not see him making that move at the beginning of this season, which is scary for anybody in the NBA that's going to have to play against him in the next couple of years. He's not a super knockdown 3-point shooter. I think he'll develop that a little bit more when he gets to the league because he has really good mechanics. His pull-up jumper is really nice. He's got really good touch around the basket. But he plays within himself pace-wise and can read the defense really well. I think those are a lot of things that Brandon Ingram also does really well. But it's the defensive side of the ball. I mean, he was the ACC first team defensively this year. And that goes with saying that he led the team in steals and in blocks as the best defensive team in the ACC. To go along with what Nick mentioned, he's just got a much better motor than most of the guys that are running NBA teams today. So the defensive prowess and pairing that with just a willingness to dive on the floor for loose balls. He was taking charges in their Elite Eight game yesterday. He's got all the intangibles to make a skilled player an elite player.
So what I'm hearing is the Celtics should trade Jaylen Brown for him.
Yes.
That might be wise.
I think so. I think that'd be great for them.
I probably would.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it was recent, but he did talk about wanting to go to the Celtics, being a main guy and wanting to stay home. So the more I hear about him, I'm like, yeah, I'd get rid of Jaylen Brown for him.
I think you have a more complete team if you do it, and you've got a succession plan, right? Not that you need one after Tatum, because Tatum's 26 right now?
Yeah.
But that's an 8-year span, right? Like, and if you think Flagg gets to 26 and Tatum starts falling off, I mean, you can just kind of keep peace. I don't know. I'm living in a dream world for you, buddy. But I'd say it's tempting if you could do it.
It's pretty crazy. I mean,
proud of how closely I tied that back to the Celtics.
And Flagg is going to be the youngest prospect in the draft. He is like 7 days from being ineligible for this draft.
Yep.
His birthday is like the 22nd or 23rd of December, and you have to turn 19 in your draft year. So he's going to be the youngest person drafted. So whoever gets him, even if it is a team with a perennial star, is giving themselves an extra couple years on their timetable.
Yeah.
Can I ask potential red flags for Cooper Flagg?
I don't know. Maybe the fact that he spells flag with 2 G's. That's about all I got.
Well, the question, the reason I'm asking, and the question is coming from a place of a personal place for me, right? Like, you guys both know this, but for the audience, I've had a lot of injuries. We've been playing a lot of basketball over the past several years together, and I've had a wrist, I've had a knee, I've had a hamstring, I've had an ankle, I've had a lot of things over the course of the past few years. The harder you play, I feel like the more likely you're going to be crashing on the ground. You're going to be you're going to have someone stepping on you. You're going to have that thing that happens. Is that going to be a thing? I mean, an 8-year-old, I was made out of like titanium and rubber, and you couldn't do anything to break me. And now a crack in the sidewalk will make me out for 2 months. So it's one of those things of, does this age well for him? Can he start figuring out a game that lasts 82 games, and then not just last 82 games, but last, a decade or decade and a half of NBA basketball. So, I mean, that's an intense game. He's an intense guy. Is that going to be a problem for him, you think?
I don't see it as a major problem, especially in today's NBA that's so spaced. Because I don't think he's going to just be like I think he's at more risk of getting injured in college right now than he is in the NBA, just because he's getting double teamed every single time he goes down into the post, and every time he drives to the basket, he's getting bumped. He's on the ground sliding into the crowd at least 3 or 4 times a game right now. And I just think that's something that happens less and less at the NBA level. Anybody can get unlucky and have something happen that takes you out. I think that's honestly most of the big injuries that we've seen happen over the last year or so feel like it's just been like a fluky thing. There haven't been a ton of like high contact injuries that have happened. You don't wish it on him, but the more you're throwing yourself around, maybe he does put himself at a little bit higher risk, but I don't feel too worried about his throwing himself around.
Fair enough. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
when you were giving your little soliloquy on injuries, I had a flashback to Gerald Wallace, who is appropriately nicknamed Crash, Charlotte Bobcat legend. But he famously punctured a lung. I was somewhere on the West Coast, maybe Portland. He broke a rib, it punctured his lung, and he had to drive back from the West Coast to the East Coast because he couldn't fly because of the punctured lung.
Yeah.
So I immediately was like, oh God, no. Let's keep Jaylen Brown. But then once you talked about spacing, I feel more at ease with that.
Fair. Fair. All right, Josh, who else you want to hear about?
Yeah,
Any of the
so
list?
I had never heard of this guy until last week, and I was listening to y'all's college basketball exclusive, and a guy named Derik Queen, and I believe Jordan referred to him as a mini baby Jokic, and I immediately hopped on YouTube and deep dived as much as I could about him. So, what do you guys have on Derik Queen? Is he really a mini baby Jokic, or is he more of a Greg Monroe?
Well, he's not Greg Monroe. He's much more skilled than Greg Monroe. Um, like that's for dang sure. He's a more conventionally athletic version of Jokic, I'd say. Like you think of Jokic as not an athletic guy, but he actually is very athletic, right? But he's not like the dunking on guys, doing super aggressive athletic moves that you're just like, man, he's a jumping, sprinting, moving at fast pace. And I think he's got a little more of that to him. But he does have a lot of skill, right? He's a rebounder, he's passing, he's super aware of everything around him. He's a very complete player. And I think he is somebody that, most draft experts are saying he's not number one, two, three kind of thing. He's kind of in that 4 or 5 range. And candidly, I could see him jumping to 2 or 3 over one of the Rutgers guys. But we
Mm,
can talk about that a little more in a second. But I think at the end of the day, he's a guy you can build around. I think he's a guy that it can be a centerpiece for a franchise potentially. He just needs to keep his head on straight and keep doing what he's doing. But he basically drugged that Maryland team through a lot this year, and they were a really contending team in the Big Ten, and it was mostly due to him. He's a dude, and he's got some dog in him too, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I think my only concern for him is just, what is he going to add to his game that's going to take him to the next level? Because I'm thinking about like a couple of years back when we Drew Timmy is doing crazy things for Gonzaga. While their games aren't exactly the same, it felt like they could both control the game in similar ways for their respective offenses. I think Queen's a little bigger, a little bit taller, so he can have a more of an impact on the defensive end, I think. But just trying to think of how he can continue to elevate his game. If he could become a very reliable passer, dribbler, then I think he's got a really bright future in the NBA. I'm worried that because he has gotten a bit of the moniker of baby Jokic, that people will grab a hold of that and try to run with it when Jokic is clearly one of one. Yeah, a little worried because he is a little more athletic than the Joker is, but he still isn't what we would call the standard NBA center of today's game when it comes
Sure.
to athleticism. I've got high hopes for him. He's really fun to watch. I picked them to go pretty far in my brackets, pretty much exclusively hoping that I could continue to watch him play. Wish him nothing but the best, and hopefully he'll definitely get away with the same sort of travels that he had on his game winner once he makes it to the NBA. So
I call it
Uh,
fair. I
I
call
want
that
to come
fair.
back to him in a minute, but you said something and it made me think back. Is the next Jokic what we saw in the early 2000s with the next Dirk, where guys like Nicholas Skeetasvili and Andrea Bargnani were top picks because teams were looking for Dirk, another guy who arguably is a one-on-one in NBA history, much like Jokic?
I think you always try and model after the best guys. We talked about Greg Oden earlier this week too, and Greg Oden, he had a lot of promise too, but because he was going to be the next Shaq. Shaq was a dominant figure for a lot of years there, and he was fantastic. But you can't replicate one of one guys, and we're talking about one of one guys. All three of them are. So I think there's bandwagoning jumping on the trends, and I think there's probably some of that. But I think this is still the ultimate direction of where the NBA is, right? I think if you look at Shaq, Shaq was still one of one, but you wanted a post center dominant guy down low, and that was the season. Like that wasn't the season of the NBA. Like that was what you were looking for in general from your center. And so yeah, Derik Queen is not going to be Jokic. I don't think he'll ever be Jokic, but I think you got a guy who can put the ball on the floor, control the ball, pass it, shoot it a bit, and he's a big guy. And so I
yeah,
think I think he's got skills that transcend what we used to see from big guys, and they're in the mold of what we see from Nikola Jokic, but they're not going to be to the same degree, right? We saw a pass this week from Nikola Jokic that I don't think I've ever seen in my life, let
Magic
alone from
Johnson
somebody
made
who's,
one.
yeah, I'm sure, but like definitely not somebody who's 7 foot tall, right? Like
Mm.
that's just he's a one of one dude.
but yeah, it is good to see. Queen has a lot of skills that appear to be the kind of skills that translate to the NBA. They're not just he's not just a back to the basket kind of guy. He can catch it and rip and go. He can make a floater. He can make a pull up. He reads double teams really well for a guy of his position. So I've got high hopes for him. I worry that he's not going to live up to hype because he's not going to be Joker,
Mhm.
um, but he'll be a fun prospect to see develop for sure.
I think his floor though is like an Alper and Sengun, right? Like I
Mm.
think he's a good player. He's got some of that ilk of nimble, kind of doing a lot of different things in the center position. And yet they're not the same players, but
The
that's kind
unevolved
of yeah,
Charmander.
yeah. Evolved Charmander, we'll go there. Like, but it's kind of of the level of like I think he could be better than Sengun. I think Sengun's a great player. He's near all-star quality this year.
I'm glad you mentioned Şengün because that's where I was going with that is the draft like boards that I was reading today, they were comparing Queen to Şengün, and one of the things that not unlocked Jokic but helped him get him over the top to the championship was pairing him with Aaron Gordon, who plays a dunker spot better than probably anyone else in the NBA. And whereas Houston has paired Şengün with Jabari Smith Jr., who's more of a stretch four. Do you guys see a stretch four as more of a uh, better sidekick for Queen, or more of like the Aaron Gordon dunker spot type guy to complement him?
I'm gonna give you the non-answer answer, which is I think it depends on who you're pairing him with. I mean, it's personality and fit, right? Like I know we've all played together at one point or another, and sometimes we fit together, sometimes we don't. And I think some of that kind of has to do with vibes and how you play with guys. And I
Mm.
think you can pair either one effectively. It's just a matter of the coaching scheme and a matter of kind of what the mentality of who the guy is. Because Aaron Gordon is great at that position at the dunker spot. I also think he brings the mentality of like he's there to serve in that role exclusively, and he doesn't have any other ideas of what's outside of his lane. He knows his lane, he does it well, and that's what he wants to be doing. He wants to be doing that.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to say right now because he's kind of had neither with Maryland, and then in high school he was just on a ridiculously stacked team that had everything that you could have possibly wanted. So one-on-one matchups galore.
He
Um,
was what, the fourth option on that team?
yeah, he was. So I think it kind of remains to be seen for him. My intuition is that it would be more of the a knockdown shooter versus a dunker spot guy, because I think he is more of a score first than a pass first, and I think we would all say that Joker is a pass first kind of guy.
Despite
Um,
being top three in the NBA in scoring.
right, and very yeah, I'd say Queen is definitely more of the score first person, and so um, if he does develop well and is becoming a person that's going to need that catches double teams in the mid post or low post, probably the better thing for him is to have a dynamic person to run some dribble handoffs with or to kick out to.
Well, I will be interested to see. I will be following him throughout the draft process for sure. I don't know if we're trading Jaylen Brown for him, but I'll be following him nonetheless. I mentioned those draft boards that I was looking at, and projected to the Boston Celtics is Johni Broome, Johni Broome. Not sure how you say that.
Deny.
That yeah, Johni Brome, that would be the Auburn big man that
Is
just
like what, 38, 39?
he is
He just got a AP, RP card.
he did.
What can you tell me about him? Should I be anywhat excited about the Celtics potentially getting him?
Nick, are you as out on Broom as I am? Because I am out the door. I've locked it behind me. He is not welcome at my NBA party. If the Lakers had to pick 10 picks after the Celtics, I wouldn't want them taking him. It's
Wow.
and he is without a doubt the second best player in college basketball this year, but he is just that. He's the second best college basketball player, and I think he's 25. He might be 24, but I think he's 25. So
I think
he
he's
is,
25 too.
yeah, he is the same age as Luka Doncic right now and playing in college. For me, I don't. He's like, well, he's obviously he's bigger than Charles Barkley. What I was going to say is if Charles Barkley was less athletic and could shoot worse, that's what you would have in Broome. I just don't see how the game translates personally. He's like 6'9", 6'10". His main skill is his back to the basket post game. He feels like a worse prospect than Jahlil Okafor. And we saw how well he fit in today's NBA. Broome is not a stretch guy. I think he shot low 30s, like 31, 32% from three. My guess is we would probably see that tick up a point or two in the NBA because he'll have more space to work with. He probably would just only shoot corner threes and only when they're wide open. So there's a chance he's like a 34-ish percenter in the NBA. But his primary skills is definitely back to the basket. And he's not that good of a defender, in my
No.
opinion. He's not like I'm thinking like of Tate on Houston, who's got a similar build. He's a little bit shorter, but he's like that stocky, bruiser build, like Broome is. And he has the defensive skills to hang with power forwards and move with guards. You put Broome out on a pick and roll, he's getting cooked by the guards. He can't move like some of those other bruisers can. Anyway,
He's not a next. He's
I'm
not a
gonna
next level athlete.
yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now. I'll let Nick maybe say one good thing about him.
So here's my take on. First of all, let's not give strays to Jahlil Okafor. That dude got a bad situation with Embiid coming in after him too. Like
Mhm.
that was a bad situation for him. He could have had an NBA career more successful than what he did, and I think he got pushed out of the way. But all that aside, Broome. Broome is a winner, right? Like he basically is single-handedly pushing a lot of their team to the Final Four. They were one of the best teams in the NCAA this year because of Johni Brome. Does he go to his over his right shoulder every single time? Yes. Is he a flawed player? Yes. Is he 6'10" on a good day? Maybe. Um, but he's still a winner, and he still is. He's still doing things in the college game. Do I spend a first round draft pick on him? Hell no. If I'm at the end of the second round and I'm looking for a guy to put in my summer league and maybe put on the back end of my roster, be a glue guy, do a few things, hope he develops and come together, sure. I'm on board with that. If the Celtics want to take him with the last pick in the NBA draft, I think that's a no loss situation. But if you want to take anybody before that, really, I don't really think so. I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Jordan. He's a great college player, go down as one of the better college players in a lot of years, but he's not it for the NBA. He just doesn't provide the athleticism, the skill, or the dynamicism to do much that's going to be effective in the NBA unless he really gets like a heart of gold and pulls everything together as the glue guy in the NBA, right?
Yeah, I would
You
say
Disney intro.
I would say he's like a less offensively skilled Drew Timmy or a uh Oscar Shibwe with no motor.
Oh my God. All right. Well,
So Jordan really likes him. I don't know if you guys could tell.
yeah. I mean, I don't even know what to say after that. Like the positive vibes of this pod, like nosedive completely. I was not expecting that.
Well, I'm
I'm
positive that
motivated.
he's going to be a bust.
I thought we
Is
were
it a
only saying
bust if
nice
you're
things
second
tonight.
round pick? What's that?
I thought we were only saying nice things tonight. Oh, well, I am making sure I send a very long email to Brad Stevens with a link to this podcast to make sure that the Celtics, under no circumstances, pick this guy. Um,
Like I
no,
said, you're going to have one of the last 3 or 4 picks in the NBA draft, Josh. I say that's not a bad move.
A second rounder, yeah. If you were able to snag him with a second round pick, that would not be a bad place to have him. He can certainly uh, be a decent player on a G League roster, and if he develops into a great shooter, if he leans up a little bit for his height and is able to start moving his feet, maybe a couple years down the road, he's a solid rotational player, but he is not a plug and play guy, especially since he's 25 years old.
yeah.
He's a big version of Khaled Alameen or big version of Mateen Cleaves. Any of those names
The nice
ring a bell
things
for
just
you?
continue.
No. Okay. Who you got next for us, Josh?
So the next guy I have, again, I had never heard of him, but Igor Demin. So Russian guy. Ended up
Hmm.
in the Real Madrid youth system, which for those keeping score at home is where my guy Luka Doncic ended up. Came over to go to BYU. Interesting move. What do you guys make of him? I read he's a 6'9" point guard who the shot comes and goes, but Euro from the Real Madrid farm system. That's my guy in this draft. I'm riding with him.
I don't know if he's a top 5 guy, but he's like you said, 6'9" point guard. His passing ability is awesome. Like he's got vision, he's got IQ, like, and you're 6'9", I think you can build off that quite a bit in the NBA. Yeah, his shot needs some improvement. His shot needs some consistency. I also think he needs a little more separation in his game. I mean, 6'9" will get you a lot of places as a point guard, but I don't think he has quite the athleticism or the shiftiness to get to the places he wants to on the court in the NBA. But I think that isn't as highlighted as much in Europe as it is here. And I think a few years in the NBA training programs will get him kind of some of that more athleticism that I think he hasn't been trained in as much. I like him. I mean, I watched the BYU who BYU Alabama game. Was that, and that was a really good game. I mean, he gets to his places and he can shoot over you at 6. Like he's a good player. I really like him, and I think he's got a potential to be a, sorry for the play words here, a demon on defense in due course in time. So I like him. I think he's a little bit of a project. There's a little bit to be determined on what he where and if he's going to be good in the NBA. But I like him. What you think, Jordan?
Yeah, I didn't get to watch as many BYU games as I would have liked, but what I did get to watch, he did give me shades of Kyle Anderson.
Ooh.
A little bit of that slow-mo type game where, like Nick was saying, he definitely played more that European style of ball that was a little bit slower, a little more methodical. Has decent touch once you get him within 15 feet of the basket, and definitely has a really solid basketball IQ, which we see from pretty much all the players that are coming out of that region. I think he could be a good player in the NBA. Yeah, I don't know if there's a ton of room right now for him to plug in and play on a team. But yeah, I think maybe you give him a couple years in the G, and then he develops into a player, or maybe gets a two-way contract or something like that. He could be a solid player for sure.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be a first round draft pick, but earnestly, I would love to see him come back to BYU. I would love to see him and AJ DeBonsa team up and do some nasty things next year at BYU. Like, I think that would just be a whole lot of fun, and that would be must see, college basketball out of Provo, Utah. Which, when's the last time we said that?
Never.
I think I agree with you, and this is where some of the conversation that we've had in the
Mhm.
past around how NIL money is going to change how one and dones happen going forward, is going to come into play, because there's so many of these guys that are actually going to be able to make more money playing in college basketball than they would playing in the G League. If this guy wants to bet on himself as a first round draft pick and say, yeah, I'm going to be able to make an NBA contract and get signed for the full season, then go for it. But if not, we know that NIL is just pouring into BYU. Give himself an extra year, give him a good chance to make a run in the tournament, another year to build his resume a little bit, to acclimate to the American game a little bit more. I'm right there with you, Nick. I think that would probably be the best thing for him going forward. But as a prospect, he has a solid future, I think.
So follow-up question on that point. Do we know how much he's getting in NIL? Because looking at the rookie scale contract, if he's between pick 15 and 20, which is where I saw him projected, that's between 3 and $4 million for being if he's on the higher end, three if he's on the lower end. What do you guys think?
I think this goes back to what we talked about a few pods ago, Josh. He's Russian. This is serious. He's Russian, so that means he doesn't really have qualifying offers for some of this NIL stuff that I think some of the other
Hmm,
guys have.
That's true.
I don't know this for a fact. I don't know what his eligibility is and what his visa says, but there's a high likelihood he's not getting paid diddly right now to be at BYU, and that's probably what it would be moving
hmm.
forward. So I think he's very likely to go to the NBA because of that.
That's fair. I hadn't even considered that. I forgot that that was a stipulation.
The next question I have for you guys is who is a prospect who is still left in the tournament, and we'll include this weekend if the teams that got eliminated, because I didn't realize we were at the Final Four. So we maybe open it up to a few more things for the listeners. You can clearly tell how much I follow college basketball. Who's a prospect that you're all in on, that either played this weekend or is still alive in the tournament that people aren't talking about nearly enough?
So he got eliminated today. And this is gonna taste so bitter coming out of my mouth. It's a guy from Michigan State. His name is Jace Richardson.
Hmm,
Are you familiar with the last name Richardson in the NBA, Josh?
I am.
So this is Jason Richardson's son, and I don't know, like I think it was like 2 months ago, he got put in the starting lineup at Michigan State, and he's been averaging like 15, 16 a game since then. And he's his daddy's son, right? Like he's got athleticism, but he's been putting on a show, and I don't know if he's going to come out this year. He's got a lot of potential, and I think he could, just with athleticism alone, I think he could do a lot of things to make the game slow down for him and be an impact player at the NBA. It would be a flyer pick. He's not probably going to be a lottery pick, but I think
Hmm.
he could be a guy worth taking, depending on if he declares and if he goes to the combine and all that. But I like him a lot.
Player comp for him, his dad.
Oh, sure, sure. We'll go. I don't know if that's true, but we'll go with it for now. It's an easy, low-hanging fruit.
Jordan.
Mine that I'm going to go with is still kicking. in the tournament. And from the Houston Cougars, I'm going to go with Milos Uzan, who is not, I don't think he's even projected to be drafted, but I think he should be on more NBA teams' radars. He has become the person that Houston has gone to when they need a bucket at the end of games. They're putting the ball in his hands over LJ Cryer, who's been there for a few years and been their number one guy for a long time, been their leader. Yeah, Uzan is. Um, I think he has the potential to be a very strong NBA player. He's tall for a point guard. He's 6'4". He doesn't have the most developed handle, but I think that's something. It's not necessarily a flaw, but it's just not one of his strengths. But he can get a bucket off the bounce. He is an over 40% shooter on catch and shoot threes. So as someone playing alongside a star, I think he's a really good fit. And he's a really strong on-ball defender. There are some folks that say that his defensive mechanics aren't necessarily the the best out of some of the defensive guards in the NCAA, but he has the tenacity of like a Colin Sexton. And that's probably who I would make as my comp for him, as like a middle of the road to ceiling kind of player is like a Colin Sexton, who can get hot and knock down a handful of shots, pretty crafty, potentially get into the basket, and then is just fiery as all hell on the defensive end, and it has really helped lead that Houston team. Been kind of a vocal leader for them because LJ Cryer is a pretty quiet guy. All reports are that he is vocal, like in the locker room behind closed doors. But when it comes to like energy on the court, it's usually their two big guys and Uzon who are the like emotional leaders on the court. So I really like him. He's been fun to watch, especially in the tournament. And he was the one that made the game winner a couple nights ago to send him to the Elite Eight. So I think he could be someone that if you took a flyer on him, he could be a great complement to a team that already has a go-to guy.
Can I amend one thing I said before? I looked up Jason. Apparently, a lot of other people are in on him too, and some people project him as a lottery pick as well. So I'm not that hot of a take anymore. But if you would have rewound a few months ago, I would have been a hotter take. But he's shown out recently, and he's been shooting well. So not
The
as hot.
hotness was in the Michigan Stateness of the take.
Sure,
Indeed.
we'll go that way.
Couple of things to wrap up this NCAA Josh learning session. The two projected picks after Cooper Flagg both hail from Rutgers. And I learned from you guys that Rutgers was a sub 500 team. Is that right? Or they just didn't make the NCAA tournament?
I
I think
think
they
they
Because they
just
were
finished
made it.
right around 500, like 19 and 17 or something like that.
What do you guys make of it? Is it more of a like Anthony Edwards at Georgia situation or more of a Ben Simmons at LSU situation?
Honestly, I didn't watch a ton of them play because they didn't play very well together. It really felt to me like
AAU team.
it felt like an AAU team. It did. It felt like they were rolling it out, getting theirs on to the next one. And that it almost felt like I hate to put it on the coaching staff, but at some point you have to like create a culture within your own program that says like, no, we're going to play offense this way and we're going to play defense this way. And it felt like they just kind of put the ball in their hands and let them do what they wanted. Um, so I don't think I'm concerned about them as NBA prospects because clearly they have the skills and are just really raw and talented. Um, but so yeah, maybe more the LSU Ben Simmons than anything, but we'll see.
Can I say both? And I mean that because there's two guys, right? I think
Oh, oh,
so. I think Ace Bailey, I'm kind of like he could be Kevin Durant, right? He could be that long stretch shooter, like great athletic, all those things. I could also see him flopping quite easily too, to be honest. Like he's a great prospect and he's got a ton of skill.
Some Jarrett Culver energy.
Yeah, a little Jared Culver energy too. I see that. He played for Texas Tech, Josh, just so you know. Uh, but yeah, I could see him being good, but I think there's a lot of development. This guy still needs to be an impact NBA player. Harper, that dude's a baller. That dude is straight up a baller. He knows his game. He knows how to get to his spots. He controls everything. He's a big point guard. He's gonna be a dude in the NBA. He's of the cut of like the Cade Cunninghams. He's gonna be a dude. I think the thing that held them back this year is a little bit of what Jordan said. There's coaching. Pike Heel is a defensive coach. He isn't used to having the wealth of riches of offensive players that he needs to play. Like you're not putting either of those guys on the bench for any reason at all other than they need a blow, right? Like those are two top three picks you have on your team. So roll out the ball and see what happens. And I don't think he's got a good offensive scheme generally at Rutgers. He's got a great defensive scheme. And if they're not bought into it, you're not going to bench them. So that's kind of just a rock and a hard place that the coach is in. I also note that I believe two of the other four starters, so four starters total, were freshmen as well. And we're not talking Fab Five level starters here where they're good across the board. I think they had some serious warts to them. And so that kind of speaks to the youngness of the team, that speaks to, some disconnects with the coaches. I think you see a little bit of who they are and the growth that's needed from both these guys, but it's independent situations from both of them, in my opinion. But we'll see.
The next guy that I want to touch briefly is a guy that Nick's got me all in on, and that's Danny Wolf from his Michigan Wolverines. All right, Nick, set some realistic expectations. Is our guy Danilo Wolvich going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer? What's his ceiling?
I think he could be good in the NBA, but we talked a little bit about of the mold of Jokic. He's of the mold of Jokic, but he's not Derik Queen even. He's a better passer than Queen. He's got more ball skills than Derik Queen. He's bringing the ball up court for Michigan a lot of times. We have legitimate point guards, so like he knows a few things here and there, but turnovers are an issue for him big time in the NCAA, like in NCAAs. You think they're not going to be any better in NBA, and I just don't. He needs to refine a lot of what he is to be an NBA player. And he's got so many skills, and he's grown leaps and bounds. He just transferred to Michigan from Yale this past year, and he's a great player. I love him, and I almost hope he stays one more year at Michigan just so that he can refine what he has. But I know a lot of people are projecting him in the first round, and as with anybody who's projected in the first round, go get paid, go get your money, and take a shot at it. So.
Yeah. For a little bit of context for the listener, that joke I made giving him a Serbian name was said if he was a European, he'd probably be a top three pick with his game. So that's the context there, pulling back the curtain. Jordan, for you, since Nick kind of already answered this question, give me a guy who's projected in the top 15, who's a sleeper that people aren't really talking about right now, but that you are a firm believer in.
This guy, depending on what mock draft you look at, I've seen him go as high as like 10 and as low as 25. And that kind of ends up being where a lot of those mid first rounders kind of fluctuate from. I'm sure we'll see it get solidified as we go, but I am really in on Common Malwatch from Duke. He's their starting center, and he's 7'2". He's probably got a 7'8" wingspan, I would guess, somewhere in that general ballpark. And he's been playing against some legit big guys throughout this whole tournament run. Even when he's not matched up one-on-one with big guys, he is affecting every single shot in the paint. You feel his imprint at every level of the game. And this is my big reason why I'm putting all my chips on him is he is a switchable big man in the pick and roll at
Mhm.
7'2". He has been switching. Duke has been playing switching defense the entire tournament with big to guard screens, and he's been popping out. Who were they just playing? They were playing Alabama, and he was going out to guard Sears at the 3 point line, who just had a game where he made 3 pointers and was legitimately locking down their guards. You pair that with the fact that he has really good hands and is a really solid lob threat and shoots 75% from the free throw line.
Mm.
You've got a perfect fit for today's NBA where he can handle the pick and roll, can take guards at least reasonably well off of switches. He is really long and tall, and so he can affect shots at the rim. He catches lobs and has good hands close to the basket and makes his free throws. That's everything you want out of an NBA big man in today's NBA.
Sounds like we know who Jordan wants the Lakers to draft. I actually know who he is because he was in the Olympics with South Sudan this past year, and he
Mm-hmm.
played well
He did.
for a kind of a surprise team in South Sudan. So,
Shout out to Wall Deng.
Maybe he'll be on LeBron's radar after they almost got upset by them.
yeah, that's a guy I'm keeping tabs on because, like you said, he's massive and he moves really well.
He
Uh,
does.
and wonder a little bit how raw he is. I dropped a Tommy Heinsohn quote in a group chat earlier this week that Nick kind of picked apart, but
All
at
right.
risk of it being picked apart again. The great Tommy Heinsohn once said it takes big guys 3 or 4 years to develop. Um, I'd say more traditional big guys is what that applies to, what he was talking about. But yeah, I'll be interested to see what he does in the league because, like you said, if he can switch at 7'2", that's Victor Wembanyama type stuff.
I mean, yeah, and the main knock against him is that he doesn't necessarily have like a go-to move or something like that. And that's what most like reports will say is the big knock on him. And I'm like, who cares? That's not what today's big man needs. Like what you need out of today's big men is someone that moves their feet on screen and roll defense, someone that catches lobs and that can potentially space out a little bit. He has not shown that he can hit the three ball. He just hasn't really had to shoot it. But the fact that he's a 75 plus percenter from the free throw line tells me that the mechanics are there and that
Mhm.
he could potentially stretch the floor out a little bit too.
So I want to note that we have talked about probably 6 or 7 of the top 9 like NBA prospects this year. This draft is loaded. I am so
Mhm.
excited about this draft. This is going to be fun because I'm looking at NBA.com's mock draft right now. We've talked on Jace Richardson, we've talked on Malawak, and like that's all of them except for 2 guys we haven't mentioned yet. And I think they're worth noting because I love both of them. BJ Edgecombe, that dude is a certified freak. Like just jump out of the gym, hit his head on the ceiling type of player. I'm really excited about him. I don't know much about his shooting ability, but he can fly and he's got a lot of game. He brings a big motor as well, and I'm pretty
Yeah,
excited about him.
really solid on ball defender there.
Yep. The other one is Trey Johnson from another freshman. He's out of Texas. I loved him. He's a great shooter. He's if you need a bucket, he's your bucket every single time. He'll get you. He can get to the rim pretty decently, but he's just a shooter. So 2 more guys for you guys to keep your heads around. But I'm excited about this draft. I think the draft NBA draft is one of my favorite things. It's like the confluence of my desire to watch like the college basketball game, but also what's going to happen with the NBA and how this translates and what you know versus what you don't know. And it's a little bit of projection and, it's the most fun to speculate. So I'm really excited about this year's draft.
Yeah, and I think another guy that I hate to just be just riding with all the Duke guys, but Cooper Flagg has put a shadow over the rest of that team, and I feel like we're not talking about those guys enough. Con Knipple is a legitimate NBA prospect. He's 6'6", shoots the ball like crazy, and plays really well off the dribble. He feels very Austin Reevesy to me,
Mm.
and is more skilled at this age than Reeves was. He feels like everything Corey Kispert wishes he was.
I love
And
that.
and,
Does he
and
have the mustache though?
no, but he does have an awesome poofy center part that really just like rounds out the white boy Wisconsin look.
I've got to look this up. I did not know that.
Oh, he is farm raised in Wisconsin looking dude. And he's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And he's not ripped either. He's like
No,
he's kind of got he's got a little softness to him too that
He's got
he's
that
gonna
yeah,
farmer strength.
yeah.
He looks like he's Wisconsin.
Yeah.
He raised on a dairy farm?
pretty much. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was raised on a farm.
Yeah, I'm in on
Anyway,
him too, Jordan.
yeah,
I think he's a good pick.
the prospects on Duke have just been overshadowed by the fact that Cooper's on that team. He's just gotten all the limelight, but there's like three or four guys that I think legitimately can have NBA careers on that team right now.
I think Tyrese Proctor can too. We just mentioned the top three, but Tyrese Proctor's been balling out, and we talked about this
Mm-hmm.
last week, Jordan. But I'm a big fan of him. I've always been a big fan of him. But he's grown up a lot at Duke in the past couple of years, and
He's got some Jared McCain vibes.
for sure, for sure. Mm,
Not as good of a dancer, but it's okay.
yeah. All right, Josh. So how much longer do we have to wait for all this intrigue for NBA draft lottery and for actually for the draft itself? Because I'm getting anxious already. I'm all excited. I don't want the seasons to end, but like that's one of my favorite parts of the season. What are we looking at for timelines?
Yeah, so for the first big date for the Flagg family is going to be May 12th, where the winner of the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes will be announced. That will be the winner of the draft lottery, uh, and it will be Utah. Let's mark that down. Cooper Flagg is going to Utah. I've been on that for a year now. And then after that, the NBA is doing something that I don't know if they've never done, but they haven't done it in my lifetime for sure. They're splitting the draft into 2 days, kind of NFL style. We're going to have the first round on the 25th of June, and the second round, an entire day to itself, on the 26th of June. We'll see if any prospects are drafted during Taco Bell commercials, because that's worked out well for guys in the past. But the lead up to the draft is always super fun.
It was a lot of fun. Combine's fun. And I also want to note for listeners that last year, this time, and even well before this time, Josh was all about saying that Victor Wembanyama was going to the Spurs. And guess where he went?
The
San
San
Spurs.
Antonio
Antonio
Spurs.
Spurs.
Josh Stradamus speaks again.
I'm not as sold on this one as last year, but let's see. Let's see if you can pull it off 2 years in a row, Josh.
The real question is how many first round picks are the Oklahoma City Thunder going to have this year, and how many of them will get deferred to next year?
Is this the I think this has got to be the year where they start like going in on draft picks, right? Like you trade a bunch of them to go up and then get some other pieces. It's got to be getting close, right?
It does depend on where the lottery balls fall because there are a couple of the ones that they have this year that are protected
Hmm.
picks from the other teams, and so then if they hit the protected range, then they get it unprotected next year.
Okay.
So it really will depend on where the balls bounce because they've got the Clippers for sure, and then they have a Sixers
Hmm.
protected top seven, I think, or something like that. And then I think they have a do they have a Jazz top like a Jazz lottery protected or something like that? I don't
Yeah,
know,
I
something like
in
that.
the Derek Favors salary dump, I
Yeah.
think it's a top 12, top 14 protected.
Yeah. So they
I don't
probably don't get that pick until next
yeah.
year, but
For a minute, my brain started leaking out of my ears because I was like, "Is there a situation where the Thunder win the first round pick this year or the number one overall pick?" But with the Clippers being competent, thank you James Harden, thank you Avisa Zubats, thank you Ty Lue for not having the most ridiculous thing in NBA history happen by being competent and giving them the 18th overall pick or the 20th overall pick wherever it falls.
Oh, the intrigue and drama. I'm so excited about this stuff, guys. But
Sorry.
yeah, we have lots more conversation around this coming. Well, gentlemen, I think this is where we should wrap it up. It's been a pleasure talking NCAA basketball. We'll probably hit it again a little bit in a couple weeks as part of the podcast as we Final Four and the finals wrap up next weekend. But we'll also start getting back in full swing of NBA again with the playoffs on the near-term horizon. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. And for all listeners, thanks for tuning in this evening. Keep your ankles laced up tight and your friend groups even tighter.
Adios.